Over the past 4 years, I have been on a journey of growth to reimagine dozens of words that I have found to be foundational to my relationships, my health and well-being, and nearly every other aspect of my life. This podcast is my invitation to you to join me in this journey. This is a better story. And joining me today is one of the many mentors of my life. This is a person who has read many more books than I have, which doesn't say too much because I'm not a huge reader. Sorry if that disappoints you. But one thing I really appreciate about you, Steve, is that even though you have all this wealth of knowledge, you have all these things that you see such a wide perspective of, I don't get the sense that anyone ever thinks that you're just this overbearing, knowledge person. Unless it's trivia night, and we're like, great, Steve, take the spotlight. But you have all this knowledge, all this wisdom. I'll give you that. But you don't flaunt it. You don't show it off. You seek to help people with that. And I'm really grateful to have you in my life. For more than just that, I think of you as a friend, and I'm grateful to have you here today. So welcome.
Thanks. I am glad to be here. This is fun.
Yes. And so, grateful is kind of a little segue into what we're going to be talking about today. Today's topic is gratitude. Gratitude is this big word. I think it's this word that we hear a lot, and we have this sense that we should have gratitude in our lives. But what is gratitude? How can we implement it in our lives? So that's kind of what we're going to be talking about for the next 40 to 60 minutes. Who knows how long these things actually will turn out to be. That's all part of the fun. But yeah, we're going to start off with this segment that we have every episode. We're calling it our 5 and 5. You have 5 seconds to talk about your own personal definition of gratitude, and then 5 minutes to give a little Steve story about your life experience with gratitude.
Oh boy.
Go for it.
Okay. All right. So the first thing is my definition of gratitude.
Right.
But not a dictionary definition. To me, gratitude is that feeling you get when you are doing something or you have an experience and you have that sense of wow, I cannot believe I get to do this. I can't believe I got to have this experience. How cool is this? Just that sort of awe and wonder of I get to do this would be my personal definition of gratitude.
That's so interesting. That's completely different than mine, but I love that. I love kind of the impact that brings to gratitude. It's not just this theoretical thing. It's something that actually moves you. 5 minutes.
5 minutes. So it's really interesting that you asked me about this word and even this format of 5 and 5 because I haven't really shared this story with too many people here in the Davis part of my life. But when I was about 2 years old, I was so I'm a pastor's kid. My dad was a pastor, and he was my parents were at some church event, and so when they were doing stuff at church, they were doing college ministry at that time. I oftentimes got dropped off at my grandparents because we just lived around the corner from them during that stage of life. So I was at my grandparents' house. I'm 2 years old. I'm in the backyard, and they were doing something. They kind of turned their back on me for a minute, and I ate the mushrooms off of their lawn.
No.
And I don't know how many I ate, but I ate enough that it was serious. And I was in the hospital for 4 days, and by all accounts, I should have died. In fact, there was a moment in the kind of the first 24 hours where it was very touch and go. My parents weren't sure if I was going to make it out of that. And then things turned around and the fever broke, and I did obviously get better. I am still alive. Although, from time to time I have these moments where like I can't remember something, or I feel like I'm not able to perform at a high level. And it's probably the mushrooms. But the point is, like, that's always been a significant part of my life story, and it's not something that I think about every day necessarily, but from time to time I do have this, that moment comes back up for me of this sense of like I could have easily died at the age of 2. Like there's even to a certain extent this reality in which I shouldn't even be here. 2-year-old kids don't eat copious amounts of poisonous mushrooms off the lawn and like come out of that. So all of that to say is I think I've always had this sense of, again, whether it's like super explicit or not, this underlying sense of like this life that I have is a gift. And by all accounts I shouldn't even be here. And so to use the word of the day, like always have had this kind of underlying gratitude that I actually am here. Wow. And that I get to do this, and that I am alive, and that my story didn't end on a lawn in San Jose in 1982, but has continued on. So I think like that sort of foundational experience and foundational narrative has really shaped a lot of my perspective, and even when things are really crummy, I'm still alive, and I'm still breathing, and I'm still here, and that's a gift. And so kind of I think that's a big part of sort of my just foundational worldview, but certainly when it comes to this concept, recognizing that at the end of the day, life is a gift, and it's pretty incredible that I get to be here and do the things that I get to do.
Wow. So
there's kind of that sort of big thing, and then I think on some other experiences that I've had, like my mom made me write a thank you note anytime something happened. I got a gift, I got to go over to someone's house, I got to, somebody at church gave me a $5 bill, whatever it was. Like I felt like my childhood was constantly writing thank you notes, and I hated it. Like I was like, I can't believe I have to write such a stupid note. But what that did, for better or for worse, was just drill into me the importance of saying thank you. And so again, even though I kind of resented some of that, there was this sense of like it is really important to acknowledge the good gifts that you get and to say thank you for the things that you receive. And so I think kind of those two things for me really speak to this idea of gratitude, that again, we receive life as a gift. It's just amazing that we even get to be here and experience any of the things that we experience. And then as things happen to us, as we receive good gifts from people, just the importance of saying thank you. Not just to acknowledge the gift that was given, but just as sort of a fundamental practice of like, wow, that is actually really cool that my grandparents send me presents on my birthday. That is a blessing that person brought me a meal, or took me out to lunch, or whatever the thing is. Like not taking those things for granted, and again receiving them as the gifts that they are.
I love that, because I feel like, so before you, Steve, it's been only Michaela up to this point that I've talked to, and Michaela and I are dating. And I feel like there's so much that I appreciate about Michaela and my relationship, but it's when I take a step back and think to myself, like, man, this is like really awesome. I am so thankful to be a part of this, so thankful to have this opportunity to be dating her, that really like that's when it like washes over me, like, yes, this is like such a blessing. Because I think it is something to have this like underlying assurance that something is good, but actually having that gratitude kind of makes it like a whole experience instead of just like an underlying experience. Thanks for sharing that. I didn't know that story about the mushrooms, man. 2 years old. I had so many mushrooms growing in my backyard growing up. Oh, I'm glad I didn't eat any of those.
We are all one step away from death at every moment. Oof.
Too real in 2020.
I know.
Oh, man. Well, cool. I'm going to jump into my 5 and 5.
All right.
5 seconds. My 5-second definition of gratitude. I don't think this one's going to last 5 seconds. It's my David definition of gratitude is it is a posture of appreciation. So, 4 words there. 2 of them don't really matter, a and of. But kind of posture and appreciation. I feel like gratitude, it's not words that you say. It's not, it's not the word thank and the word you and saying it in a way that your voice gets a little bit higher so the person really knows that you're excited about it. It's really like a posture. And when I think of posture, it's like everything in your body is aligned in the correct way. And so when I think of gratitude, it's not just about saying thank you. It's not just about having a smile. It's like, I know we're both fixing our posture as I talk about posture. It's really everything being aligned and really this like inner feeling of gratefulness. Kind of you were talking earlier about the awe, like almost like not believing that this person just did something for you. Even if it's something so small as like saying like, hey, your shirt looks great today. I love coffee. You brighten my day. It's not just the words coming out of the mouth. It's the posture of it. And then appreciation. We've been talking about this before. Don't really need to say it's not just noticing something, but appreciating it. Mm-hmm. That's what completes it. My 5 minutes. I have 2 quick stories, kind of like you. Hopefully, I'll get them all out in 5 minutes. My first one is kind of strange. It's a very David story. This happened a couple years ago. One of my friends named Naran was visiting Davis, and he was sitting on our couch, and he was having a conversation with one of my housemates about gratitude. He was talking about how he took an entire college course about gratitude, and it was
really?
Wow. It was like 15 weeks just talking about like all of the amazing things that gratitude does. Whether it's like mental, physical, emotional, you name it.
What department or category of academia was that class a part of?
Well, it wasn't Davis. It was a private school in SoCal called Biola. You've probably heard.
Oh, it was a Christian.
Yeah, it was a Christian
college.
college.
Okay.
Yeah.
One of those.
But
yeah,
I think it's still so
it's
awesome.
Still really cool. Yeah.
And I was kind of standing. I kind of walked into the conversation. I was just listening. I had missed the first 2/3 of the conversation, like the part where they had talked about like all of the actual benefits. But I just got this like sense of like, you can talk for 15 weeks about the benefits of gratitude. I should try to be more grateful because it'll be like super positive for me. And so literally, I kid you not, from like that day and like moving forward, I just tried to be more grateful because I thought like, man, this would just make my life so much better. Could teach a 15-week college course about gratitude. And so I've tried to like truly be grateful and to have a posture of gratitude kind of ever since then. I mean, it's not like I was an ungrateful runt before then. I wasn't too young. But that was the moment where I was like, man, gratitude must be something that's really good. And I think in the past couple of years, I have found it to be very good. Surprise, surprise. So that's story number 1.
Okay.
Story number 2, I was biking. I think people who followed this podcast for a while will know a lot of stories about me biking and almost getting run over. But yeah, there was a woman who was in the road, and she just decides that she wants to park on the side of the road. But I was beside her. I was probably in her blind spot. But she didn't there's no warning. She just goes from the road into the bike lane and like parks on the side of the road. And I was right there beside her. Oh, yeah. So I slam on my brakes, and the car like just passes like right in front of me. And then the car behind her is just like honk, 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 like holding it down. Literally like pulls up beside her, rolls down the wheel, and just starts like yelling at her. And meanwhile, I just kind of like bike around, I try to act like nothing ever happened. And then the car that was honking at her like pulls up to me, and he's like, "Dude, like she almost killed you." He's like livid.
He's mad for you.
He's mad for me, which I kind of appreciate that, to be honest, because I try not to be like mad at times, but sometimes it feels like this feels like a situation where some anger is warranted. So I was like, I'm glad he can be angry for me, because I don't want to be angry at this person. Anger like ruins my day. Kind of like the opposite of gratitude, like kind of makes your day better. Like being angry, I feel like that makes your day worse. Not that being angry is always bad, but like he was like, "Man, like she almost killed you," and I was like, "Yeah," and I was like, I responded really positively, and he was kind of like straightened up. But for me, it was like, "She almost killed you," and I was like, "Yeah, like she almost killed me, but here I am. I'm alive. Like I'm grateful to be. I'm grateful that she didn't kill me. I'm grateful, honestly, that you kind of yelled at her. Maybe I shouldn't be grateful, but I'm a little grateful about that. I'm grateful I get to share this moment with you." And he's still like livid. And it was so funny because he had like his son right there, and his son was just cracking up about this whole thing. Like I still remember like how he was just like busting up laughing about this whole thing. Like his dad was livid, I was like joyful. Like the whole situation was just hilarious to him. But it really that situation sticks out to me because it was like I can imagine two people being in the same exact situation, and one person will have been very, very justifiably like riled up and angry, and I think I was justifiably grateful because I was alive and completely unharmed. And when I went home, I was about 2 minutes away from home. I was pretty like happy. I was a little shaken up because I did almost get run over, but I was like, hey, I didn't get run over. Like today, like I'm doing all right. And like that really had a positive effect on the rest of my day. Almost getting run over had a positive effect on the rest of my day. And it really makes like real for me, like, yes, like gratitude is something that can take something that was almost terrible and make it to like, yes, like, and make it like positive in my life, and I think in a lot of people's lives. So that's my two stories. It's always a challenge for me to get it to be 5 minutes or less. Hopefully I was close enough.
You're the boss, so you can do whatever you want.
You have any thoughts about either of those? Any Steve reflections?
I have a fun fact. So, did you know that Biola stands for Bible Institute of Los Angeles?
I do know that. Yes, my brother's an alumni. So.
Okay, yeah, insider knowledge. People are always like, "Whoa," when they find that out, because they think it's like a Greek word or some like kind of clever Christian thing. I'm like, no, it's just an acronym. I do think that. So we kind of made fun of the whole Christian college thing there for a moment, but I love that there's a class on that, because I do think that I don't really like these sorts of like there's two kinds of people in the world. I think life is obviously much more complex than that. But again, I think you either wake up in the morning and go, "Oh my gosh, I get another day," and how cool is that? Or you wake up in the morning, I got to go to work, or what, And I think those are just two fundamentally different postures. And I think that posture of gratitude, as you were talking about earlier, of again, that sense of awe and wonder that we are alive and that we get to be here, versus the posture of just get through it, or grit and bay your teeth, or live for the weekend. I mean, whatever those things are, to me are kind of the two sort of fundamental ways that you can go through the world, and so I think it's great that there's a class about that, because to me, I don't even know what the right word is, but a good life, a quote unquote successful life, is very much tied to this posture of, wow, what a gift to be here and to be alive. And I think life is just much more difficult on the other side of that. But that's my experience.
Yeah, I want to jump off of that. We've been talking about this posture of gratitude. Say someone's listening to this and they're like, man, like I really want to have that, a posture of gratitude, because maybe they wake up on a Tuesday morning and they don't want to go to work. You know, they got kids that need to be taken care of. They don't really want to, spend the first moments of their day taking care of the kids when not everyone has to take care of kids. Like I'm living a great life. Like I wake up and I take care of myself. But like how? I think of a physical posture, and you say like, shoulders up, back, drop them down. That's great posture. And yet it's also, you need to work out your back muscles so that your back muscles are strong enough to hold the posture. You need to eat right so that you have the energy, because when you're low on energy, it's easy to let that posture slide. And so while in some sense you can just say like, oh yes, I need to just have a posture of gratitude. Like how do you actually like obtain a posture that can be carried forward? You have any thoughts?
Yes. So I think, again, two kinds of people in the world: those who wake up grateful, those who don't. Again, oversimplification.
Sure.
And just because you are, say, in that category of people who wake up in the morning and are grateful to be alive, that doesn't mean that person doesn't get depressed. That doesn't mean that person doesn't have a morning where they're grumbling or where they're annoyed that their alarm clock has gone off at a certain time. So it doesn't mean that you're always happy. But your fundamental perspective on the world is grounded in gift. And so I'm a pastor, I'm a Christian. I care a lot about this word grace. And again, I think so part of it this doesn't mean that every single moment of your life is like, hey, isn't this great that we get to be alive? Oh. But it's either grounded in grace or it's grounded in some other thing. And I guess the opposite of grace would be earning, or merit, or whatever word you want to use there. But so again, just because you have a sort of gracious outlook on the world doesn't mean that everything is great all the time, doesn't mean that you're always positive and happy. But when you sort of dial it back, the foundational principle is this is all a gift. And isn't that amazing? Now, that being said, there are, I think, a word that I like to use is the word practice. There are practices, there are disciplines. This is why I told the thank you note story, because again, I did not like doing that. That was not fun. But
I hated that too.
That was, and I mean, it continues to this day to be a practice, a foundational practice for me of saying thank you. And I think that's part of the importance of practices and disciplines is the doing it is more important than the liking it. Right? And so it's in the doing it, sitting down with a piece of paper and a pen, or these days sitting in front of your computer writing that email, that shapes you. The more you do that, even sort of forcing yourself to do that, creating that habit. So I think there are habits of gratitude, and many people have many different ways of doing this. Some people that I know have a gratitude journal. At the end of the day, they sit down and they write down 5 things that they were grateful for that happened over the course of the day. We do this in my family with our kids at the dinner table. Something that you were grateful for that happened over the course of the day. So there's that. There's other sorts of just kind of reflective things. There's the thank you note thing. But whatever it is, I think you do have to implement some things where, as you think about and examine your life, whether it's on a day-to-day basis or looking at bigger chunks, and you have to do the work of looking for it. If you just one of the things that I talk about a lot is you don't drift into certain things, and so if you want to be a person who experiences more gratitude, awe, wonder, grace, again, it's not a matter of like merit and earning it, but you have to sort of arrange your life in that particular direction. And so you might think, wow, I would like to be a more grateful person. That's great, but you're not just going to sort of randomly fall into that. You have to do some things. So I'd be curious to know, you walk into your living room, you hear your friends talking about this, you hear about this 15-week class. Like, what were some things that you did to begin cultivating gratitude in your life?
Yeah, I think the core thing is this idea. I talked, was it last week or 2 weeks ago? Here on this podcast, I talked about how, like, in like a lot of opportunities, like you can grow or you can not grow. And for me, I saw that in a lot of opportunities, like I could just walk through the experience in life, or I could be grateful. So it was almost like this forcing of myself to find something to be grateful for. I remember actually one story that I heard from you, Steve, that I have it written down in front of you, is you told a story about how in your family you have get-tos for chores. If there's chores, they're not have-tos. It's not I have to take out the trash, I have to vacuum, I have to clean the dishes. It's I get to. I get to join in something that benefits like the family, that serves other people. And changing it from have to get to changes it from this like I have to do this to like yes, like I get to serve and bless some people who I really care about. And so for me, it was in situations, it was turning have tos into get tos. It was turning oh man, I almost got ran over to like whew, I'm so glad I didn't get run over. It was really like a situation happened, like something that was pushed me away from the norm. You can wake up in the morning and just have like a normal, boring day, but usually there's like an event or two, like every single day, that's just abnormal. That's just like it doesn't necessarily like throw you off your track, but it's almost like it's just a little bit off of your track. And for all of those events, I was a little bit stubborn. I was like, David, like find one thing that you can be grateful for. And at first it was pretty hard. Sometimes it had to be a little bit of a stretch. But I've been talking about momentum here for weeks, and this is another thing that just has so much momentum behind it. Because now it's like it would be hard for me to like not be grateful in like 99% of situations, because like once I started like saying like, oh, like yes, my housemates didn't do their chores of cleaning the dishes or taking out the trash. Hey, I get to like super surprise this person and make their day by doing dishes for them or taking out their trash. And so on their mind, they've had a busy day. They've had, you name it. I don't know what they've had, but after all of that, they're like, oh, and then I still have to clean the dishes, and then I still have to take out the trash. And then, they get to the sink or they get to the trash can. It's like, wow, like someone else said, like I got to bless that person, and I wasn't doing anything. Like, I mean, come on, it's COVID. We all have so much time on our hands at home. But it's kind of like these situations where I have nobody would fault me for being annoyed or for taking a negative experience. Like I just stubbornly just like, no, I'm going to choose to find something to be grateful for instead. And it turns into something that becomes like a struggle, to something that becomes like, just part of what you're doing. You search for something that has gratitude. There's something where your brain doesn't even need to really search, because that's what it's looking for in the first place, and it just finds it. It finds some place to be grateful for. And I'm not trying to say that, I'm the shining example of perfectly grateful at all times. But it really is something that, like, once your brain starts firing that way, it just keeps on firing that way. And it's just like with all habits. You can have a habit that hurts. You can have a habit that helps. Having a habit of gratitude is something that you got to start, and sometimes it sucks. Just like working out, just like almost all things that help. Having a healthy diet, but it's hard at first. Once you start getting to the rhythm, it's like, okay, like I think I can do this, and then you forget that you even had to do the work, like, because it's just something that becomes like part of you. Not that you ever get to a point where you're fully grateful. You can always become, you can always find more things to be grateful about. But it starts off difficult, but it gets easier, for sure. Let's see. I wanted to talk about Thanksgiving and Christmas. This is kind of a shift. When I was a kid, I think, as with most kids, Christmas was my favorite holiday. And just a couple years ago, I was at a Thanksgiving feast, and one of the feast, I just called it a feast, and one of the people there was like, man, like, Thanksgiving is just my favorite holiday. And I was like thinking about it. My initial reaction was like, no, Christmas is the best, obviously. And I was thinking about it, and I was like, you know what? Like, I enjoy Thanksgiving more than I enjoy Christmas. I had assumed Christmas was always the best holiday, but I enjoyed Thanksgiving more than I enjoyed Christmas, and I think it was mostly because this idea of gratitude. But Steve, I want to ask you, what is your favorite holiday? And kind of Thanksgiving, gratitude, those two are connected. Like, what's your experiences with Thanksgiving and this whole idea of kind of like people, like entire groups of people, like choosing to be grateful?
Yeah. I think I like Thanksgiving more than Christmas, just on a personal level. Although now having kids, Christmas kind of is fun again. I think when you're a kid, Christmas is really fun, and then there's this, at least in my experience, there's this period of time where like Christmas is just kind of like whatever. It's a break maybe from kind of normal life, and so that's a good thing. But at least when I was 24 and poor, Christmas was a bummer. But then you have kids, and then you start to go, oh yeah, like this is really fun, and just kind of that like excitement that goes along with it. So it's kind of swinging a little bit back to Christmas. I really like Thanksgiving because I like to eat. And I actually like a lot of the Thanksgiving food. Like, I know there's kind of this debate out there, like, well, turkey's terrible. Why do we eat that? But I actually like Thanksgiving food and have a lot of really good memories of Thanksgiving growing up. And so I think it's a little bit nostalgic. But in terms of, like, again, sort of the underlying truth of our conversation, I think I'm gonna do a very Steve thing. Okay. I'm gonna say they're both great because they both are around this idea of gift. And I think, again, especially from a kid perspective, Christmas is all about getting, receiving what's going to be under that tree, what did Santa bring me or whatever. But if you do it right as a parent, part of what you are teaching your kids in the Christmas season is the joy of receiving gifts. And again, tying this back into the bigger idea of all of life as a gift. And so back to your word posture, this posture of receiving as opposed to either holding on to or fighting against the things that we are experiencing in the world. And so I think both holidays can be profound moments of gratitude. But again, a lot of it has to do with your posture towards it. This is just a totally random thing, but as a pastor, my least favorite holiday is Easter. which is really funny because you would think like, oh, Easter is great, right? But usually it's super draining and a lot of work.
Huh.
And so I'm always glad when Easter is over.
That's so interesting.
I don't know what that means really, but
yeah, and I feel like Easter is so ambiguous, where it's like Christmas, it's like people seem to even if they're they don't believe in Jesus at all, they're like, yeah, we know it's about like the birth of Christ. But Easter is like, no, it's actually about like Easter bunny. It's like it's actually about like it feels like it's lost some of its impactful meaning. And regardless of whether you agree or disagree with the message behind Christmas or Easter, kind of like the message has impact, whether you agree or disagree with it. And it feels like Easter, like the whole thing about like chocolate bunnies and like it just has no impact. Like who cares about eggs?
So I have a whole riff on this. I'll try to keep it brief. But I think part of at some point this may tie back into our bigger conversation. But I think part of what's hard for people about Easter is that it is fundamentally a step of faith, because you're talking about a guy that came back from the dead, and so that's either something that you buy into or you don't. Everybody loves babies being born, and so I think there's more of a universal like, yeah, we celebrate birth. We don't celebrate resurrection the same way because it doesn't happen that often, right? And so again, it's much more of a like I either buy into this or I don't. Whereas I think with Christmas, it's a little bit more of I think it's a lot more of a universal like, oh yeah, babies, like something being born. But underneath all of that is again that sort of it's miracle of being alive, right? So.
That's so interesting. Literally last night, so we're talking 12 hours ago, I was on Reddit. You're familiar with Reddit? Okay.
I'm mostly familiar with Reddit because of you, David.
Oh, yeah. I'm kind of happy to hear that. Yeah. I was on Reddit, and I read this post where someone who had a life sentence was asking a court for his sentence to be removed because he was pronounced dead, and then, he was revived. And wow. He said, I served my life sentence. And it's like, this kind of thing is like, well...
That is an awesome argument.
Kinda, like... it's so shady. But literally, that was last night where I read that. And now you're talking about, like, resurrection today. But I've never connected those dots. Like, a couple people will say, yeah, Jesus was never around. But, like, historians in the day, they're pretty unanimous, like, Jesus was around. But, it is a lot harder to like come to terms with like, oh yeah, this is a holiday about resurrection from the dead, like that. Yeah, it is easier to think about Easter bunnies, even if that has no substance to it at all.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. And I think for myself as well, Thanksgiving was something that as I grew older, I appreciated more, kind of like the whole atmosphere of it. And Christmas, I don't have kids yet, and so of course it does lose its shine the older you get. When you used to have to start paying like rent, but you don't have like a salary job, it's like this feels bad. Buying gifts for everyone whose income is like 3 times mine.
Sure.
It's just my personal family. Like during Thanksgiving, like everyone just wants to hang out with everyone else because everyone seems to have this posture of gratitude. And during Christmas, there's oh my goodness, every year during the White Elephant, there has to be at least one family member who buys a present that nobody wants.
Sure.
And so it's like that present gets passed out, and like nobody's thinking about the 20 presents that everyone wants. We don't have 21 people at the White Elephant. Everyone's just like, oh no, who's going to end up with that thing? So it's like this. There's there could be 15 amazing gifts and one bad one. It's like, oh no, like there's this bad gift getting passed around. I never have gotten that with Thanksgiving. It's just gratitude. What if during Christmas, what if I was like, man, I'm so grateful that there's 15 awesome gifts that's being passed around, and that 15 of us are going to walk away with a great gift. There is still the reality that someone won't. But yeah, I think this is it's almost like a microcosm. I hope I'm using that word correctly of like the bigger things in life. Like there's this sense of like, yes, I bought these people gifts, they should buy me gifts too. That I think goes around on Christmas. Or maybe you have the sense of, oh, like I feel like these 3 people are going to be buying me gifts. Now I have to go buy them gifts. And that can be like a major burden. Maybe there's like family members who you haven't seen in a while that sometimes you have some awkward moments, and that can be like a major burden. But I think there are ways to be grateful about those things. Like, man, I have 3 people in my life who I'm confident they're going to give me gifts. Like that's a blessing. I want to bless them in return. Sometimes I have like awkward conversations with this family member, but like they're still family. Like I have them in my life as a family member. Like, I can get through this, even if you're not going to have like a great conversation with them. I want to return to though. You had mentioned like this. This might be like one of the final things we're talking about. But you had mentioned this idea of like always being able to go back to like this gratitude of having of being alive, of having life. That's not proper English. But like. I kind of see things when I talked about hope. I talked about there's 2 kinds of hope. There's like this hope in things that are like almost certain. And if you missed the episode, like one thing that if you're married, you can hope that unless your spouse is like on a business trip or doing something like that, you can hope that when you wake up in the morning, like the person that you love is going to be right there beside you. And I think. Gratitude can really tie into that thing of hope. Like, if there's something that you can hope in, you can be grateful for that. And there's kind of hope that I always hope that the Oakland Raiders are going to win the Super Bowl.
Hey, they are in Las Vegas now.
I always forget that. So I guess that hope is dead in the water.
Yeah.
But I always hope that the Raiders are going to win the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And that's not a solid hope. That's not a hope that I want to build confidence in, because let's be real, it's probably going to be a long time before that happens. I am sad to say, but I think gratitude is something that's pretty similar. I think we can be grateful for things that happen randomly, and a lot of us, we think, gratitude, you should be grateful towards the random things that happen in life, but there's also these things that we can return to and be grateful for. Things that when life is going bad, we can be like, yes, but I have this. So have you seen kind of like these 2 different types of gratitude? I mean, so you are a pastor, you work with a lot of people, so I'm sure you've seen all types of things. But what's your experience with kind of like gratitude in like solid things versus like gratitude in like random things?
That's an interesting way of thinking about it. I'll just keep coming back to, the same thing that I said earlier, but a lot of it does come back to, again, that fundamental narrative that you have about life. And so I'll try to tie in a couple of things that we've just been talking about. But like the Thanksgiving metaphor is, I think, really helpful here because for a lot of people, their experience of Thanksgiving is arguing with family members, around the dinner table. And especially, in this day and age, like, there's a lot of jokes and memes out there about, like, all the things you should not talk about at the Thanksgiving table, right?
There's an Adele music video about it.
Exactly. SNL did a great one. Again, for a lot of people, there is that sort of negative, experience, and there's all kinds of different reasons for why that would be. But I think, in thinking about my own family, like, what do I want my kids, my family to experience at Thanksgiving? Do I want it to be this time where we get together and we either pretend like everything is fine and don't bring up any difficult topics, or where it's just like devolves into arguing and chaos, right? Or is this a time where we actually do pause and we name the things that we are grateful for? So some of it, some of those, especially family things, are a little bit out of your control. But again, developing the practice of, for my family, Thanksgiving, to continue using this example, is not about pilgrims in America. It's about, here's a time in the year where we're going to set aside some space to think about the things that we're grateful for. Why? Because to be a follower of Jesus, again, from a Christian perspective, is to live from this place of receiving the gift of life, receiving the gift of grace, which is ultimately the gift of eternal life that you experience now and after you die. And so, yeah, I think to go back to your original question, I think it's a little bit of both. Like there is a what is your fundamental narrative about the world? And is it, again, one of, I deserve this, or is it one of like, oh, like I can't believe this is true. Like I received this. Like this is so amazing that I get to be here and experience these things. And so that's, I think, the bedrock of it. But then, at least in my experience, if you do live from that place of, wow, what an amazing thing to be here, it does begin to change how you experience different things. And again, it doesn't mean that you're always happy. It doesn't mean that nothing bad happens to you, or that if something bad happens to you, you can't be angry about it. Like there's certainly a lot of space, I think, to express frustration and anger over terrible things that happen to you or things that happen in our world. But there's the people who live from that fundamental narrative of receiving, of grace, of gift. You've probably heard me say this before, but in the Greek, the root word for joy, grace, and gift is the same. Chara, charis, charisma. It's the same Greek root for all three of those words. So there's this sense in which gift, grace, joy, it's all connected. And if you live from that place, you begin to see things, I think, much differently. And so you begin to see beauty in some of the absurdities in our world. Pay attention to the people in your life who laugh a lot are people who I think are living from that place of gift and grace and gratitude. People who don't laugh very much are probably living from some other story. So back to your idea of a better story. I think you may have also heard me tell this story before, but I heard this story from a guy named Simon Sinek, who wrote a book called Start With Why, or Know Your Why, or something like that. And he tells the story about these two guys. They are stonemasons. They're building a building, and one of them, is asked the question, do you like your job? And he says, well, it's hot and these rocks are super heavy and I've been doing this my whole life and it's probably not going to be finished by the time that I die, but hey, it's a job and it pays the bills. And the second guy is asked the same question, do you love your job? And he basically answers it the same way, right? Like, it's hot, the rocks are heavy, this is backbreaking work, it's probably not going to be finished before I die, but I'm building a cathedral. I love my job. So one guy, hey, it's paying the bills, whatever, it's hard, but at least I can put food on my table. The other guy is like, I'm doing this amazing thing. Like I'm building a cathedral, and even though I'm not going to be the person that puts the last rock in the wall, this is I can't believe I get to be a part of building this thing. And so again, those are just two very fundamentally different stories to live from. Are you just paying the bills, or are you building a cathedral? And I think this very much, like that second stonemason, is very much living from that place of gratitude of I cannot believe that I get to do this. Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. What better way of ending our discussion about gratitude with that? I think that's so true, that two people can do the same exact thing, and one person can get so much joy out of it, and if you're not someone who's a laughy type of person, I'm sure, Steve, you in no way were trying to take a shot at people who don't laugh a lot. But I would encourage anyone listening to this, just because you are one certain way, ask yourself, would you rather have more joy in your life? And don't ask yourself in a way that kind of feels like you should arrive at a certain answer. Try to ask yourself with that in front of you. Would you like to have more joy in your life? Don't assume the answer is yes. Don't assume that the answer is no. Just ask yourself, would you like to have more joy in your life? And I think kind of the way I like to end a lot of things is kind of one thing to take away. And I had something else planned for my one thing to take away. But I'm gonna go with that. Like, ask yourself that question without assuming the answer. Would you like to have more joy in your life? And if you arrive at the answer yes, like, take steps to practice gratitude. So that's my personal thing or suggestion, encouragement to walk away from this. Ask yourself that question without assuming an answer. And if you arrive at the answer yes, take steps to practice gratitude. Steve, I want to give you an opportunity. What is one thing that you would like people to walk away with, be it an encouragement or a step to take or whatever?
I mean, examine your fundamental story, which is like takes some work. That's not just something where you on your 10-minute drive home go, yeah, I wonder what, like you have to kind of dig into that a little bit. And that can happen, individually. It might be good to do that with, a good friend, or even better with a counselor or someone like that. But examine your fundamental story. And then back to, again, this idea of practice, like, what are 1 to 2 things that you can do to start cultivating posture of gratitude? Is it writing stuff down at the end of the day? Is it naming a couple of things? Is it, if you're in a family roommate situation, is it creating time, in a day or over, some point during the week to express those things out loud to one another? Hey, David, what was something this week that you were really grateful for, and having to think about that and name that. And even to like the get to versus have to thing, like, again, part of that is there are going to be times when you are doing things and it definitely feels like a have to. And so that's where you need to do the work of how am I going to approach this? And even, to use your example of the dishes, like, if you just commit to, I'm going to do the dishes every night for the next week, then you know that you're going to be doing it, and it's not random, and it's not something you have to kind of psych yourself up for. You just know you're going to do it, and then as you do that, you begin to cultivate that sense of like, yeah, I'm doing this because I chose to, and I carved this time out, and I'm getting to do this, versus wandering into the kitchen at 9, seeing a pile of dishes, and going, oh my gosh, like, here we go again, right? So again, sometimes it's just as simple as that. It's just kind of structuring your day, your week in such a way that it's no longer a chore. It's just something that you've said yes to. And when you've said yes to it, then I think that changes a lot about how you experience it, versus, well, I guess I'll do it because no one else is going to do it, right? So anyway, examine your fundamental story, implement a couple of practices, and see how it goes.
Love it. I love it. So that is going to wrap up today's episode on gratitude. Like I say every week, if there's something here that you really appreciated hearing, that you felt was impactful for you, hey, let me know. podcastabetterstory@gmail.com. Or maybe
you have an email address.
I have an email address. Yeah, I don't yet have a social media account. I'm kind of bad when it comes to social media. I think I've made like 3 social media posts in the last 2 years combined. I should probably make a social media post. If you really would enjoy it, if I had a social media account, let me know. And if it's something that y'all want, then I'll make it. Why not? Or maybe just let me know something that you're grateful for in your life. And hey, if I want to start sharing some things that you guys share with me, so also let me know if it's something that you would be willing to have me share on air. That totally rhymes. That's awesome. Whether it's something you appreciate about the show or something that you're grateful for in life, I think hearing me talk is one thing, but knowing that there's a community of people that's also like pressing into things as well is awesome. Next week we are going to be talking about a word that I think has a really bad rap, but I think is a really good word and is actually strangely connected to gratitude. That word is humility. So we're going off of the train of words with G. We had good, we had growth, we had gratitude. We're moving way forward in the alphabet to H and humility.
Big jump.
Oh, man. But until then, I hope that you have a great week. I am so grateful that you are here checking out this podcast, wanting to join me on this journey. Steve, any last words? All right. Well, have a great week and watch out for bears. See ya.